Ty, what did you tell the guys after tonight's game? Did you guys talk about the whole season or just about tonight's game?
No, I just brought it in, and I taught the guys individually. A tough loss, and like I said, not playing our best game in a situation like this, and a lot of emotions. And so, just told the guys bring it in. One last hug, and we'll talk tomorrow. But they came out. I thought we came out with a decent mindset. They went to that zone and kind of made us stagnant offensively because of the way we were attacking them. And then I thought, when they went to that zone, it just kind of slowed us down offensively. And then defensively, we didn't really, get into them, get closer to the guys, and have that pressure. And so they was able to pick us apart.
But can you evaluate this season for you guys, starting back from, well, September up to now?
Man, that's a long time ago, but I think, starting training camp, not having Kawhi and the uncertainty of when he'll be back. I thought James did a great job of leading this group. And then to start the season, the kind of season that Norm had, the career season that he had, the career season that Zoo had, and James being able to hold this team together until we got Kawhi back and getting Kawhi back to where he was in, rare form of who he is. And so once he got back and got to playing like himself, I thought we really put together a strong run. Winning 18 out of 21 to get to this position, I thought was really good. But I just thought, like you said, all year long, just sticking together, staying together until we got to this point. And like I said, I'm proud of the guys and everybody in that locker room for what we was able to, accomplish as far as staying together, winning 50 games. And you hate to see them go out like this, in the game seven. So that's very disappointing.
So you guys exceeded a lot of the external expectations this season, but it always felt like all year long internally you guys had a lot bigger goals for yourself than what the outside expectations may have been. How do you kind of emotionally just take that all in at this point, knowing that you guys did exceed a lot of expectations, but at the same time didn't go nearly as far as you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, like I said, when you lose the last game and you get eliminated, it's tough to think about all that. But like I said, for the guys, for everybody in that locker room who contributed and in any way they did, I think is huge. I think coming out supposed to win 35 games and we win 50 games and get to the fifth seed and play against a really good team. And so we had our opportunities, and then tonight, so it was just a tough loss for us. So I think everybody's thinking about that right now because everybody in that locker room, from coaches to players, are great competitors.
Ty, what do you? I know you haven't spoken to them yet. When you do plan on talking to James and Kawhi in particular, like those guys made it to this game healthy, and they're at the stage of the career that they're in. Like, what do you plan on kind of telling them to encourage them, but also, something that gives all of you a thought that you could do this again next year?
Yeah, I mean, just encouraging. I think James having to carry such a heavy load. With Kawhi missing, I think 45 games, and just having to carry that load, all season long. And he did a great job with that. And I think Kawhi, like I said, coming back being Kawhi and having a confidence in his knee that he can play more minutes, he can get through these games, and those two together for a whole season, I think would be tremendous. And so when you have your best player missing 45, 40, 47 games, it's kind of hard to really gel the way we wanted to. But I thought they did a good job of just sticking with it, and whatever we need to do to win that night, they did it.
Ty, how tough is it just to rationalize the way that things unfolded tonight when you hold Nicola to 14 or whatever it is,
16,
and
yeah.
Jamal and him to 0 of 9 start? How do you make sense of just what happened when you guys did that on him?
I thought one, we didn't do a good job transition defense. We allowed them to get out in transition. The steals they did have, they were pick sixes, they were dunks and layups. And then, when they found their offensive rhythm, it was hard to stop them. And, they run good stuff. Thought DA did a great job of just putting guys in position to be successful. And, like I said, they picked us apart, I thought, and everybody got involved. And so, when you're playing against a good team like that and you try to take the best player in the world out, it opens up everything for everybody else, and they did a good job with that.
Ty, back here. Sorry. Kawhi's talked all year that he wants to get to the offseason healthy. That's what his big plan was. He is now getting into the offseason healthy. What do you think that can do for him mentally, and what do you think it can do for you guys going into next season knowing you're going to have him from the very beginning of that season?
I think it does a lot for him mentally. Just the challenges along the way to get to this point for him. I'm very pleased and excited for that. It's just the hard work every day it took to get to this point. But to start a training camp, with him healthy, I think will be great for us. I think putting guys in their positions where they could be successful, not having to do too much, and having your best player to start the season, I think is very encouraging.
Coach, what will be your biggest takeaway from this season, and what does your off season look like for you?
I haven't thought about the off season. To be honest, I thought about OKC. That's what I was thinking, but it didn't work out that way. And so, I don't know. It's frustrating losing, but I'm not frustrated with the guys in the locker room. If that makes sense. Just a loss alone just makes me mad. But I'm very, like I said, very happy for what those guys brought all year long, and next year we'll see.
Ty, you spoke about the players and the guys in the locker room, but what are your kind of emotions right now? How are you dealing with just everything that's gone on?
How am I dealing with it?
Yeah, you talked about the guys in the locker room; they're down. But what about you? What are your emotions through this?
I feel the same way. Whether you overachieve or not, like when you lose, in the playoffs, it's tough, and so, I feel bad. Like I said, our players feel bad, and like I said, it's all you're thinking about is this game. Like I said, you're not thinking about the season. You're just thinking about, things you could have done better. We got to this point, and it's frustrating to go out like this. And so, if you want, like how I feel, I'm pissed off.
And I know that these games aren't lost on one or two plays, but we look at how the first four games when you guys could have been up 3-1, maybe even sweep them. Do those the dunk or maybe an extra shot here? Is that is that the kind of thing that makes you think going into an off season? Does that make it even more frustrating?
Yeah, like I said, the dunk. I think being up here, game one, being up one with the ball with 37 seconds, turn the ball over. Things like that. But it's a lot of what ifs. And so that's over. That's in the past, and we just know going forward, like the things we got to get better with, and just go from there.